The next morning on the Galactic Council station began with silence that felt too deep to be normal. The wide corridors that were usually full of soft light now seemed dimmer, colder. The human diplomat walked alone, hearing only the quiet hum of the station. Every sound echoed. Every step felt like it was being watched. He had been told there would be another meeting today, not an open one, but a private discussion with a few senior members of the council. Officially, it was to talk about cooperation and trade. But from the way the message had been delivered, short, formal, and without warmth, he knew there was more behind it. As he entered the chamber, he noticed right away that it was smaller than the grand hall. The lights were low and only a few representatives were present. Each of them sat in shadow, their faces barely visible. A round table floated between them, glowing faintly with shifting blue light. The grand speaker wasn't there. That was unusual. It meant this meeting was not entirely official. He took his seat quietly. No one spoke for a few moments. Then a tall figure from a distant world leaned forward. Its voice was sharp like metal scraping against glass. "Human representative," it began. "Yesterday your words were confident. Too confident for someone whose world has only just joined our order." The diplomat stayed calm. "Confidence is not disrespect," he replied gently. "It is clarity. We only wish to be understood." Another voice joined in, deeper this time. "Understood?" Or obeyed. The air felt heavier. The table lights flickered slightly, reflecting in his eyes. He could feel the mood turning colder with every second. He leaned back slowly, folding his hands. "Earth does not ask to be obeyed," he said. "We only ask to be treated as equals." That word, equals, seemed to stir something in the room. The tall figure leaned even closer, its faintly glowing eyes narrowing. "Equality is earned," it said. "Your world still crawls compared to ours. You build machines you do not control, fight wars you barely understand, and yet you come here dressed like you belong beside us." For a moment he didn't answer. He could hear the faint buzz of energy in the walls, the heartbeat of the station itself. Then he said softly, "Perhaps we build what we do not control because we're still learning, but that's what makes us different. We try, we fall, we rise again. Maybe that's something the galaxy forgot long ago." There was silence again. He knew some of them were listening not just to his words but to his tone. Calm, steady, not defensive, not afraid, and that perhaps was what they didn't like. One of the smaller delegates, a being made of pure light, spoke next. "Your planet has strength," it said. "But strength can be dangerous when it comes without humility." The diplomat looked around the room, his expression unchanged. "Humility brought us here," he replied. "But we cannot survive by bowing forever." There it was again, that calm, dangerous honesty. The meeting ended without warning. One of the guards stepped forward, signaling it was over. No formal closure, no words of agreement, just silence and cold stares. The diplomat stood, bowed slightly as respect demanded, and left the chamber. As he walked down the corridor again, he felt the weight of eyes behind him. Somewhere in those dark corners, whispers followed. He knew that this wasn't just a conversation about diplomacy. It was about control, and Earth had stepped into a circle that didn't easily share it. Back in his quarters, the quiet felt louder than ever. He sat down, opened his digital tablet, and began to record his daily report. The words appeared slowly as he spoke. "The Council does not see us as equals. They test our patience, our silence, and our hope. But they don't understand that silence doesn't mean weakness." I will continue to speak calmly, but I can feel the edge beneath their politeness. Something is coming. He stopped the recording there and closed the screen. For a long time he just stared at his reflection again. Tired eyes, unshaken face. He thought of home once more. The blue oceans, the smell of rain, the laughter of people who didn't even know what kind of place the galaxy really was. He had promised to protect them with words, not weapons. But in this place even words could be turned into weapons. A soft chime broke his thoughts. The door to his room slid open slightly, and a familiar voice called out. It was the small alien attendant from yesterday, the one with the glowing skin and kind eyes. "Representative," it said quietly. "May I come in?" He nodded. The creature floated inside, holding a small crystal device. "I should not say this," it whispered, "but there are voices in the council. They think you spoke too strongly. Some believe your presence here was a mistake." The diplomat listened without interrupting. "And what do you believe?" he asked gently. The attendant hesitated, then said, "I think they are afraid. Afraid of something they cannot yet name. Your world is small, but your words, they remind them of the time when they first met others. They don't like remembering fear." He gave a small, tired smile. "Fear is natural. But I didn't come to bring fear. I came to bring understanding." The attendant nodded. "Be careful," it said softly. "Not everyone here wants to understand." When it left, the room felt emptier than before. The diplomat leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling lights that glowed like faint stars. He wondered if peace ever truly existed, or if it was just a pause between struggles. Hours passed. Messages came and went. He responded to none. He needed to think. Late in the cycle, the voice of the station AI echoed through his room again. "Representative of Earth, you are requested to appear at the Central Archive Hall." He frowned slightly. The archive hall wasn't a place for meetings. It was where the council stored its records, millions of years of treaties, laws, and histories. Why would they call him there? Still he went. The archive hall was enormous, almost silent, filled with floating orbs of light that held memories from across time. As he walked through it, each orb glowed faintly as he passed, projecting fragments of long-forgotten moments, ancient wars, first contacts, lost civilizations. At the far end stood 3 council guards. They didn't speak. One of them handed him a data scroll. "The council has decided," the guard said, his tone flat, "to delay Earth's entry into the Galactic Union until further review." He looked down at the glowing scroll, reading the words slowly. It wasn't just a delay, it was a message. "A warning, on what grounds?" he asked quietly. "Unstable temperament of the representative," one of them replied. "You spoke too boldly." He closed the scroll slowly, his hand steady. "So truth sounds like boldness now," he said softly. No one answered. The guard stepped aside, motioning for him to leave. He turned, walking out with calm steps. But inside his mind was racing. He knew what this meant. The council was not just judging him, they were judging humanity. They wanted to show Earth its place, to remind the young planet that it was still small, still beneath them. Back in his quarters, he didn't send another report. He simply sat in silence, thinking of how far humanity had come to stand in that hall, and how quickly they were being pushed back. Outside his window, the stars shone brightly, scattered like sparks in the dark. He watched them for a long time, his reflection fading into the glass. Then in a low voice he said, "If they wish to see who we truly are, they will." He didn't mean it as a threat. He meant it as a promise, a quiet reminder that Earth had never been given anything easily. Everything humans had achieved had been earned through persistence, through endurance. He straightened his suit again, almost unconsciously. To anyone else, it was just fabric. But to him, it was a symbol of patience, of control, of strength that didn't need to shout. Tomorrow, he knew, things would change. The whispers would turn into actions, but he would face them as he always had, with calm eyes and a steady voice. And somewhere deep inside, behind that calmness, a quiet energy began to wake. It wasn't anger. It was something older, the part of every human that refuses to kneel when others demand it. In the endless dark of the galaxy, one man sat alone in a suit that looked simple, but carried the weight of a whole world's hope. And as the station lights dimmed again, his voice whispered into the silence, "We came in peace, but peace needs strength too." The next day would bring the truth, and the beginning of something none of them were ready for. The following day began like a whisper, quiet, cold, and a little too still. The human diplomat woke up before the lights rose in his quarters. For a moment, he just sat on the edge of his bed looking at the floor, feeling the low hum of the station under his feet. Everything seemed normal, but deep down he knew it wasn't. He moved to the window and looked out. Beyond the transparent wall, stars stretched in every direction. The Galactic Council's main station floated among them, shining like a silent city of light. Ships moved in and out carrying ambassadors, traders, and envoys, but that morning even the sight of that grand beauty couldn't calm him. He had read enough faces, heard enough words to know what was coming. He poured himself a cup of the dark liquid that passed for coffee on the station. It tasted nothing like the real thing, but it gave him comfort. A small piece of home in a place that didn't feel like home at all. As he stood there, a soft chime echoed from his door. He wasn't expecting anyone. Slowly, he said, "Enter." The door slid open, revealing the same small alien attendant who had spoken to him before. Its glowing eyes seemed dimmer today. It looked nervous. "Representative," it said softly, "you are requested in the security wing for an identity verification." He raised an eyebrow. "Identity verification? That's already been done." "Yes," the attendant said, "but there was a report. They say the scanners detected something irregular during your last session." He set his cup down slowly, eyes calm. "Irregular?" The attendant looked down. "They did not tell me more. But please go carefully." He gave a faint smile. "Don't worry," he said quietly. "I always do." He followed the narrow corridors toward the security wing. The air there was colder, the lighting sharper, almost clinical. Guards in metallic uniforms stood near every entrance, their helmets reflecting the corridor's light. As he entered, a tall officer motioned for him to stop. "Representative of Earth," the officer said formally, "we need to confirm your biological and technological identity." He nodded slowly. "Of course." He stepped into the scanner platform, a circular pad surrounded by light pillars. The officer pressed a command and a beam of light swept over him from head to toe. The process was supposed to take only seconds, but this time the light stopped halfway. The scanner's hum deepened. A red symbol blinked on the screen. The officer frowned. "Unregistered anomaly detected," the computer voice said. "Subject not fully classifiable." The diplomat didn't move. His voice remained calm. "Is something wrong?" The officer looked uncertain. "There seems to be interference," he said, trying to sound professional. "It's reading unknown material signatures in your clothing." "Unknown?" The diplomat repeated quietly. "Perhaps your scanner needs calibration." Before the officer could respond, another figure stepped out from the shadows. A senior security commander, older and wearing a darker uniform. "Step down from the platform," he said firmly. The diplomat did as told. The commander studied him for a moment. "We appreciate your cooperation, Representative. However, we must ask you to surrender your outer garments for further analysis. Just a precaution." He met the commander's gaze without blinking. "This suit is diplomatic property of Earth. You have no right to confiscate it." The commander's tone hardened. "We have every right when an unidentified signal appears inside our station. The Council's safety is priority." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the scanner still running in the background. Then the diplomat gave a small nod. "Very well," he said calmly. "But if you search for trouble where there is none, you may find more than you expect." He removed the outer layer of his suit and handed it over. The officer took it carefully and placed it inside a containment unit. The commander watched closely, his eyes sharp and calculating. "You may leave," the commander said finally. "We will contact you after the analysis." The diplomat turned to go. As he stepped through the doorway, he could feel the weight of their eyes following him. Something wasn't right. He wasn't sure if this was an official procedure or something else. Something personal. Back in his quarters, the silence felt heavier than before. He sat down and looked out the window again. The stars were still there, distant and peaceful, but the peace in his heart had faded. He began recording another log, his voice quiet but steady. "They are testing me, not just with words now, but with actions. They want to know what I am, who I am, perhaps even what Earth truly has become. But they are mistaken if they think suspicion will make me afraid. Fear is not in my nature anymore." He stopped, listening to his own voice echo back in the room. It sounded colder than before. Not angry, just detached, like someone who had begun to accept that peace was no longer enough. Hours passed slowly. The station moved through its artificial day cycle. No messages came. No visitors. The attendant didn't return. Then, late in the evening, the door chimed again. This time it wasn't a polite sound. It was sharp, urgent. He stood up. The door opened, and 3 council officers entered, led by the same commander from the morning. "Representative," the commander said flatly, "you are to come with us. The council requires your presence immediately." The diplomat didn't ask why. He simply nodded and followed. They led him through silent corridors that grew darker as they went deeper into the station. Finally, they stopped before a massive door marked "Restricted Access." The commander opened it with a code. Inside was a wide room with tall windows overlooking the stars. At the center stood several council members. Not all, just a few powerful ones. They didn't greet him. They didn't even offer him a seat. The Grand Speaker was still absent. That was enough to tell him this was not an official session. One of them, a tall being with crystalline skin, spoke first. Representative of Earth, our scans revealed irregularities in your biological field and your clothing. Would you like to explain? He looked at them calmly. I already told your security that my suit was made on Earth using hybrid materials. If your scanners can't classify them, that's not my concern. Another voice, this one softer but sharper in tone, said, Hybrid materials from a planet barely past interstellar infancy? Do not insult us, he took a slow breath. I don't insult anyone, but I won't apologize for what we've achieved. The crystalline being leaned forward. You speak with pride for a world that has barely survived itself. Perhaps the council was too kind to invite you. The diplomat's gaze hardened just slightly. Perhaps, he said softly, you mistake kindness for control. The air in the room seemed to still. One of the council guards shifted uneasily, as if sensing the tension. But the diplomat didn't move. His voice remained calm, measured and firm. The voice of a man who refused to bend. Another counselor, older and cloaked in silver, said, Tell us what you truly are, human. Our systems read energy signatures in you that no ordinary being carries. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Maybe it's not energy you're reading, he said quietly. Maybe it's will. The counselor tilted his head. Will? Yes, the diplomat said. The will to survive. The will to stand even when others try to make you kneel. That's something Earth carries, all of us do. Maybe your machines can't measure it, but it's real. For a long time, no one spoke. The council members exchanged glances. Some looked thoughtful. Others looked annoyed. Finally, the crystalline being sighed. You may go. But understand this, human. You walk a dangerous line. The council watches you now. He nodded once. I expected nothing less. As he turned to leave, the commander stopped him at the door. What did you mean? The commander asked quietly. When you said we might find more than we expect. The diplomat looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, Sometimes what you fear isn't what's hidden. It's what's human. Then he walked out. The corridors felt longer on the way back. Every step echoed in the silence. Somewhere deep within the station, he could hear distant mechanical sounds, the heartbeat of the council's grand machine. When he reached his quarters again, the first thing he noticed was that his suit had been returned. It hung neatly where he had left it, spotless, untouched. But as he ran his hand across the fabric, he could feel something different, a faint warmth like the suit had remembered what happened. He smiled faintly. They think they understand everything, he murmured. But they don't even understand us. He looked once more out the window at the endless stars. Each one seemed to flicker like a quiet witness. Somewhere, unseen, Earth spun far away, unaware of what was unfolding here. He whispered to himself, They wanted to test a diplomat, but what they're really testing is patience. Outside, the council station continued to shine like a jewel in the dark. Perfect, calm and full of secrets. And somewhere deep inside that silence, the story of humanity's strength was just beginning to reveal itself. The next day would not be about words anymore. It would be about truth, the kind that no one could deny, not even the stars. The station drifted through the darkness of space like a silent city made of glass and light. From the outside, it looked calm and peaceful, but inside something was changing. Whispers had started moving through its endless halls. Whispers about the human representative who spoke too boldly, whose suit carried unknown materials, whose presence unsettled the oldest minds in the galaxy. The human diplomat knew all of it. He could feel the eyes following him wherever he went. Even the way others greeted him had changed. Yesterday they smiled politely. Today they only nodded, cold, formal, careful. He walked slowly through one of the observation corridors, hands behind his back. The stars beyond the window looked close enough to touch, yet so far they might as well have been dreams. As he looked at them, he thought of home again. Earth. The green fields, the sound of rain, the smell of old soil after a storm. He wondered if anyone there truly understood what kind of place he was standing in now. A place where peace was just another kind of power. His small communication device buzzed softly. A message appeared written in the common tongue. Private meeting. Sector 9. Come alone. There was no signature, no official seal. Just that. He stared at the message for a long moment, then sighed quietly. So it begins, he murmured. Sector 9 was deep within the station, an area rarely used for official work. It was quiet, filled with dark glass walls and faint glowing symbols. When he arrived, the corridor was empty, or at least it seemed that way. Then a soft voice spoke from the shadows. You should not have come here. He turned slightly, his eyes finding a familiar glow. It was the same small attendant, the one who had warned him before. I was invited, the diplomat said calmly. By whom? I don't know, the attendant whispered. But there are those who wish to see how far you can be pushed. He studied the creature for a moment. And what happens if I don't break? The attendant looked at the floor. Then they'll be afraid of you. The corridor suddenly felt colder. The diplomat took a slow breath. Fear is a poor foundation for peace, he said softly. Yes, the attendant replied. But it's the one this council understands best. Before he could respond, another voice echoed from the far end of the corridor. Stronger, sharper. Representative of Earth, you're far from your quarters. He turned to see a group of council guards approaching. Their armor reflected the corridor lights, and their expressions were unreadable. The lead guard stepped closer. We've been ordered to escort you back. For your safety, the diplomat smiled faintly. Safety, he repeated. That's a generous word. Still, he didn't resist. He followed them through the maze-like halls of the station. The air was thick with tension, but he walked as if nothing was wrong. Inside, though, his mind was steadying itself, ready for whatever came next. When they reached his quarters, the guards didn't leave immediately. They stood outside, speaking quietly among themselves. The diplomat pretended not to notice. He sat down at his desk and activated the small hollow journal. His voice filled the silence once more. Peace is not given freely. It is tested, shaped, and sometimes twisted. The council doesn't trust what it doesn't control. But I was not sent here to please them. I was sent here to remind them that peace has a backbone. He paused, then added softly, and that backbone is human. He ended the recording and leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. He could still hear faint murmurs outside his door. They thought they were guarding him, but he knew the truth. They were watching him. Hours passed. The artificial lights dimmed, signaling the station's night cycle. The guards were still there. The diplomat stood, moving toward the window again. The stars outside seemed brighter tonight, burning quietly in the endless dark. He lifted his hand and placed it against the glass. The reflection of his own face looked back, calm but tired. The faint light traced the edges of his suit, and for the first time he noticed something strange. A soft blue shimmer pulsed beneath the fabric, faint, almost invisible, like a heartbeat. He frowned slightly. So it still remembers, he whispered. That suit, simple, dark, unremarkable, wasn't just clothing. It was part of a project humanity had built years ago, when the world still feared invasion from the stars. A last defense, a symbol of survival. It wasn't a weapon, it was a promise. It reacted only when its wearer was in danger. And right now it was stirring. He took a slow breath and whispered to himself, Easy. We're not there yet. The light faded, leaving only darkness. The next morning, the council called an emergency session. He entered the main chamber quietly. The hall was filled, every seat occupied, every representative watching him as he walked to his place. The Grand Speaker had returned, his presence tall and commanding. The moment the diplomat sat down, the speaker's voice echoed through the hall. Representative of Earth, he said, there are grave concerns regarding your presence here. The council believes your technology is not what you claim. Your suit contains unknown systems. Your body emits signals no human should. The diplomat looked up slowly. And? The speaker's tone sharpened. Explain. He leaned forward slightly, his voice even. I did not come here to explain who I am. I came here to explain who we are. Murmurs spread through the hall. The speaker raised his hand for silence. Your words test our patience, and your judgment tests our trust. The diplomat replied quietly. The hall fell silent again. He could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. Some were angry, others curious. Only a few looked sympathetic. He continued, You see us as a young world still finding its way. You call us unstable, emotional, unpredictable. Maybe that's true. But everything you call weakness, our passion, our stubbornness, our endless hunger to learn, is the reason we're still here. Every mistake we made taught us to endure. Every loss taught us to value what we have. That's what it means to be human. A silence followed. Even the translators paused, letting his words hang in the air. Then from the far end of the hall, a cold voice said, "And what does it mean to wear a weapon while you preach peace?" He looked at the speaker of those words, a thin, silver-skinned alien whose eyes glowed faintly. "It's not a weapon," the diplomat said. "It's a reminder." "Of what?" the alien demanded. He looked around the hall, meeting the gaze of every being there. His voice was calm, steady, almost soft. "That peace survives only when someone is willing to protect it." The words hit harder than any argument. For a moment, the entire chamber seemed frozen. The Grand Speaker's voice broke the silence. "You speak like one who has seen war." He nodded once. "I've seen what happens when peace is taken for granted." The speaker studied him quietly, then said, "If what you say is true, then your presence here is both a gift and a warning." The diplomat stood slowly. "Perhaps that's exactly what it's meant to be." He turned to leave, but before he could take a step, the floor beneath him flickered with a sudden pulse of light, the station's sensors reacting to something. Gas filled the room. His suit had begun to glow faintly again, that same blue shimmer spreading like veins of energy. The guards moved instinctively, but the speaker raised his hand. "Stand down," he ordered. The diplomat looked down at his hands, the light fading almost as quickly as it had appeared. He said quietly, "It reacts to fear, not threat. It knows when peace is breaking." The speaker's eyes narrowed. "And what does it see now?" The diplomat looked around the room. "Fear," he said simply. "A room full of civilizations who've lived so long that they've forgotten how to trust." He bowed slightly. "Earth doesn't seek control. We seek a place, now not above, not below, but beside you." Then he walked out, leaving the hall in complete silence. Outside, as he stepped back into the wide corridors, he felt the air change again, a lighter somehow. He could tell not everyone understood him, but they had heard him. That was enough. When he reached his quarters, he stood before the window again, looking at the stars. The faint reflection of blue light shimmered across his chest once more. This time he didn't try to hide it. He whispered softly, "Maybe this is what vengeance looks like. Not in battle, but in truth." He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He wasn't angry. He wasn't proud. He was simply certain. The galaxy would remember this day, the day a human stood before the oldest powers and spoke not with weapons, not with threats, but with quiet strength. And though the council still didn't trust him, somewhere deep inside their minds they had begun to realize something new, that the universe had changed. Humanity had arrived and it would not be ignored again. The alarms that echoed across the council station faded one by one until silence filled the air again. The corridors that once hummed with voices now stood empty. What had just happened was something no one could explain clearly. A human's presence had disrupted their most advanced sensors, and the council, for the first time in years, felt uncertain. The human diplomat stood in his quarters, still calm, as if the chaos outside had nothing to do with him. He had taken off his suit jacket and laid it neatly on the table. The faint blue light that had once pulsed beneath it was now gone, leaving only fabric, plain and harmless. He poured himself a glass of water from the small dispenser on the wall and looked out through the wide observation window. The stars were silent witnesses, glittering like scattered diamonds across a dark ocean. For a few minutes he said nothing. He just breathed. Then a soft knock came at the door. He didn't answer immediately. The knock came again, more hesitant this time. Finally, he said quietly, "Come in." The door slid open with a soft hiss. A tall, slender figure stepped inside, a member of the council's internal committee. Her silver eyes studied him carefully as if trying to read his soul. "You caused quite a disturbance today," she said. Her voice was calm but sharp, the kind used by people who were used to being obeyed. "I didn't mean to," he replied, sitting down slowly. "But sometimes truth makes more noise than weapons." She tilted her head slightly. "You speak as if you expected all this." He smiled faintly. "I expected fear. That's the only thing that spreads faster than light in this place." For a moment she said nothing. Then she walked closer, lowering her voice. There are those who want to send you back to your planet immediately. They say humans are not ready to sit in the council. And what do you say? He asked. She hesitated. I think they're afraid because they can't understand you. Every species here hides behind something. Power, technology, ancient laws. But you humans, you walk in with nothing but words, and yet somehow you shake the room. He looked up at her. That's because we remember what it's like to be small. You forget faster than we do. Her expression softened a little. You've made enemies, but also some admirers. He leaned back, his gaze thoughtful. That's how peace always starts, in between those who dare to listen. She looked around the room, then back at him. The council has called for a private review tonight. Only select members. You'll be asked questions, Amon, and some won't be kind. I've faced worse questions, he said quietly, and worse silences. She gave a faint nod and turned to leave. But before stepping out, she paused. Tell me something, she said. Why do you really wear that suit? He smiled slightly. Because it remembers what I've forgotten. Then the door slid shut behind her, leaving him alone again. The station's nightlights dimmed. The long corridors glowed faintly in silver and blue as the artificial gravity shifted to its low-energy mode. But in one of the council's upper halls, light still burned bright. A dozen of the most powerful beings in the galaxy gathered around a long circular table. The room was silent except for the soft hum of energy flowing through the walls. When the diplomat entered, every head turned. He could feel the weight of their eyes, curiosity, suspicion, and something else, something like unease. He didn't wait to be invited. He walked to the center and stood there quietly. The grand speaker, seated at the far end, broke the silence. You've caused great concern among the members, representative of Earth. The diplomat nodded slightly. Concern means they're paying attention. That's a good start. The speaker's tone hardened. This is not a game. Your presence has triggered systems older than your civilization. Your suit defies every scan we've used. What are you hiding? He looked around the room, his eyes calm and clear. Nothing you haven't already lost. Fear. The words struck like a slow echo. A few members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. He continued softly. You built this council to create peace. But peace turned into control. You forgot that peace can't survive if it belongs only to the strong. It has to belong to everyone, even to those who have nothing. One of the members, a tall creature with a crystalline body, leaned forward. You talk as if you've come to teach us. No, the diplomat said quietly. I came to remind you, the speaker frowned. Remind us of what? That once even you were afraid of extinction, of war, of the dark between the stars. That fear pushed you to build this place. But in time you turned it into a throne instead of a bridge. The hall grew still. He took a step forward, lowering his voice. Humans know what it means to start small. We've built everything with our hands, our mistakes, and our hope. You can measure our strength, but not our spirit. You can study our technology, but not our will. That's what you're afraid of. No one spoke. The room felt heavy, like the air itself was listening. Then the speaker asked slowly, And what about your suit? What power lies hidden within it? He glanced down at the dark fabric, then back up. It's not a weapon, he said simply. It's a memory. Of what? The speaker pressed. He looked at the long table, at the faces around it, all different yet all the same in their quiet pride. Of every person who stood for peace and was silenced. Of every world that begged for mercy and was ignored. Of every voice that tried to speak and was crushed by fear. It carries their silence so I don't forget what I represent. A deep stillness followed. The lights above dimmed slightly, casting soft shadows across the table. The speaker leaned back slowly, studying him. You speak of vengeance, yet your tone is calm. You speak of pain, yet you carry peace. What are you really, human? He met the speaker's gaze without flinching. Just a reminder that peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the courage to stand when everyone else kneels. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, the speaker stood. The council will deliberate, he said. You may go. The diplomat bowed his head slightly and turned to leave. As he reached the door, the speaker's voice stopped him again. Tell your people, he said, that the galaxy will remember this day. The diplomat paused but didn't turn around. So will we, he said softly. Then he stepped out. Outside, the corridors were empty again. The hum of the station seemed quieter now, almost respectful. As he walked, he passed a group of younger attendants whispering to each other. They stopped and stared as he went by. None spoke, but the look in their eyes was different now. Not fear, but something closer to awe. He reached the observation deck once more, the same place where it had all begun. The stars stretched endlessly before him. He leaned against the railing and closed his eyes. For a moment he thought of home again, of children playing in open fields, of families laughing beneath clear skies. He thought of Earth not as a power but as a promise, a world still learning, still trying, still human. A faint sound came from behind him. He turned to see the same silver-eyed committee member approaching quietly. She stopped beside him and looked out at the stars too. "Did it go as you hoped?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "I didn't hope for anything. I just wanted them to listen." "They did," she said. "And more than that, they understood." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe that's enough for now." They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars. Finally, she said softly, "You know, some of them said you reminded them of the old heroes, the ones who didn't fight with weapons but with words." He smiled, eyes still on the stars. "Maybe that's all a diplomat really is. Someone who believes words can still move mountains." The stars shimmered across the glass, and his reflection looked almost otherworldly, half human, half light. Far behind him in the council chamber, decisions were being made, quiet, powerful decisions that would shape the years to come. The human had left an imprint on their minds that no scanner could erase. For the first time in centuries, they began to speak not as rulers but as equals. And somewhere deep inside the vast space station, systems recorded a small change in the archives, an update to the records of the Council. First human representative, Earth. Status, active. Influence level, rising. Back on the observation deck, the diplomat whispered softly to himself, "Maybe vengeance isn't about destroying. Maybe it's about reminding the world that justice still breathes." He smiled, not with pride but with quiet relief. The mission wasn't over, but peace had finally spoken back. The stars glowed brighter as if they too were listening. The following days were unlike anything the station had seen before. The tension that had filled its metallic corridors had softened. The whispers that once carried suspicion now carried curiosity. Everyone, from the youngest assistant to the oldest council member, spoke of the human who stood alone, before the galaxy's most powerful, and did not bend. The council had gone into private meetings right after that night. No one outside knew what was being discussed. Rumors floated everywhere. Some said the human had been offered a place among the highest ranks. Others said he would be quietly sent back to Earth. But the truth was simpler and far more powerful. Change had begun. In a quiet corner of the massive station, the human diplomat sat in his quarters again. The small desk before him was covered with notes, old holo recordings, and messages from Earth. His communication device blinked gently, showing an incoming message from his superiors back home. He opened it and a warm, familiar voice spoke. "We've been monitoring everything. You've done more than we expected. The Council's tone has changed. They've paused all aggressive decisions against Earth. Whatever you said, it worked." He listened silently, then responded softly. "Words have weight when they come from truth. Maybe they finally heard ours." The message paused for a moment before the voice added, "You've given us time. Time we didn't have. Now the world will know that Earth can stand equal among them. Come home soon." He smiled faintly. "Not yet," he said. "There's still something left unfinished." He ended the call and looked out the window once more. The stars glimmered like distant fires, ancient and endless. Each one represented a world, a people, a story. And now, somewhere among them, Earth had found its voice. A soft sound interrupted his thoughts. The door chime. He turned and said, "Enter." The silver-eyed committee member stepped in. She looked calmer this time, less guarded. In her hand she carried a small crystal tablet. "The council has reached a decision," she said. He stood slowly. "And?" "They've agreed to open a new seat," she said, handing him the tablet. "A permanent seat for Earth." For a moment he said nothing. He looked down at the shimmering surface of the tablet, his reflection merging with the soft blue light of the hologram. "So it's done," he murmured. She nodded. "You've done what no one thought possible, but—" She hesitated. "They didn't make it easy." The vote was close, he smiled faintly. Change never comes easy. If it did, it wouldn't last, she studied him quietly. Do you ever tire of being calm? He chuckled softly. Calm doesn't mean I'm not tired. Her eyes softened. The galaxy will remember this, you know. The day a human stood before the council and made them listen. He looked back out the window. I didn't make them listen. I reminded them why they should. She smiled, understanding the quiet pride behind his tone. When will you return home? Soon, he said, but not before I see what comes next. Outside the window, a transport vessel drifted by, its lights blinking gently in the dark. Beyond it, the stars seemed to shimmer more brightly than before. The following day, the council made their public announcement. Across the galaxy, holograms and broadcast screens lit up with the image of the grand speaker standing before the council's crest. After deep consideration, the speaker declared, the council recognizes Earth as a permanent member. Humanity, once an observer, is now a voice in the unity of worlds. The announcement echoed through every station, every trade post, every colony. Some celebrated, some questioned the decision. But everyone listened. For the first time in centuries, a new world had been given equal standing among the oldest civilizations in existence. Inside the chamber, the diplomat stood quietly at his assigned seat. No cheers, no applause, just silence and then a single nod from the grand speaker. You've earned this, the speaker said softly. But know this, human, with recognition comes responsibility. The galaxy watches now. He bowed slightly. Then we'll make sure what they see gives them hope. When the session ended, he walked slowly through the long corridor that led out of the council chamber. The same guards who had once watched him with suspicion now stepped aside with quiet respect. As he passed, one of them, the leader from that night in the corridor, gave a small nod. It was wordless but sincere. The diplomat acknowledged it with the faintest of smiles. Later that evening, he returned to the observation deck. He stood in silence, hands folded behind his back, watching the stars once again. The reflection of his face on the glass looked peaceful but thoughtful. He knew what this meant. Humanity's seat among the stars wasn't just a political achievement. It was a promise, a weight, a reminder that peace needed constant courage to survive. He spoke quietly, as if to the stars themselves. We didn't win a war. We won a chance. A faint blue shimmer appeared beneath his suit again, glowing like a heartbeat. He looked down at it and smiled softly. You can rest now, he whispered. It's over. The light faded slowly, leaving only the simple black fabric once more. Suddenly, the soft hum of the door broke his thoughts. When he turned, he saw a group of young cadets standing hesitantly near the entrance, new representatives in training from other worlds. Sir, one of them said shyly, may we speak with you? He gestured for them to come in. Of course. They stepped closer, their faces curious and bright with the kind of hope that only the young still carried. One of them, with wide golden eyes, asked, Is it true you faced the council alone? He nodded lightly. Yes, but I wasn't truly alone. I carried the voice of every human who ever dreamed of peace. Another asked softly, Were you afraid? He smiled faintly. Always. But fear is just proof that something matters. They listened closely, hanging on every word. For them, he wasn't just a diplomat anymore. He was living proof that even the smallest world could be heard in a universe that had forgotten how to listen. Before they left, the youngest of them turned back and said, What will you do now? He looked out the window again. Now, he said, his voice gentle, Now I go home. The group smiled, bowed respectfully, and left. The door closed behind them and silence returned. He stayed there for a while longer, thinking. The stars outside didn't look as distant anymore. They looked almost familiar. The next day, his transport ship was ready. As he walked through the docking bay, crew members from dozens of different worlds stopped and nodded to him. Some smiled. Some simply watched. None of them looked down on him anymore. He stepped onto the boarding ramp, but before entering the ship, he paused and looked back one last time. The station stood massive and glowing, orbiting quietly in the dark. It had been a place of tests, of tension, of revelation. And now it was a place of change. He took a deep breath. Goodbye, he said softly, though no one was there to hear it. As the ship detached from the station, the engines lit up with soft white fire. The stars shifted slowly outside the viewport, and the great structure began to fade behind him. In the reflection of the glass, his own face looked calm, but there was something else too, something almost hopeful. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small silver emblem, the official seal of the Galactic Council. It shimmered faintly in his palm. He placed it gently on the console beside him and whispered, "For Earth." As the ship entered hyperspace, the stars stretched into long trails of light. Back at the council station, the Grand Speaker stood at the same window where the human once stood. Behind him, the silver-eyed committee member approached quietly. "Do you think he'll return?" she asked. The speaker watched the stars fade and said softly, "Maybe not soon, but his kind always returns when the galaxy needs reminding." She smiled faintly. "And when it does, I hope it listens again." The speaker nodded slowly. "It will, because now it knows the truth." Outside, the stars burned brighter than ever. Somewhere far from the station, the human diplomat sat quietly in his ship, watching the light blur around him. For the first time in a long while, he let himself rest. He thought of Earth, of the oceans, the wind, the smell of rain. He thought of how far they had come from the days of silence and struggle. He thought of every person who believed that peace was worth the cost. And as the ship drifted through the endless dark, he smiled quietly to himself and whispered, "Vengeance doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it rebuilds." The stars ahead shimmered like a path, and he followed them home.